Just an immediate heads up, I did not do a miller's run, nor did I paddle at sea in these conditions. This is Zandvlei, which is a small lake about 2 kilometers inland from Muizenberg. It was the sight that greeted me in the road that I live in when I got back from my paddle. But back to the beginning. The forecast for the miller's run was indeed extreme, between 30 and 55 knots, but with a decent direction between 7 and 10 o'clock in the morning. And so there was a bunch of us that had met very early at the club, and it was there that we decided not to go, given that early on at 6:30 the wind meter at the club was already reading gusts of in the mid-50s. As you can see from this chart at our club, it did in fact get as high as 60 knots. So I decided to channel my disappointment into a paddle in the nearby vlei, where my objective was to test my ability to paddle headfirst into 40 knots and see how far I could get. The short answer is not very far at all, perhaps 300 or 400 meters before my arm pump started kicking in. When you paddling directly into 40 knots like this, there's significant strain on one's forearms. I think if my life had depended on it, I had half a chance of making it to the end of the vlei. Information, the end of the lake that you can see ahead of me is less than a kilometer away, so this 40 knot plus wind is generating these waves in less than a kilometer and a half of fetch. There's a good lesson for me here in that had we launched this morning, our plan was to have launched from Glen Beach to get a more direct line and to lessen the prospect of being worried by the westerlies in this open channel here. But the lesson that I got, particularly with my propensity for arm pump, is that even if we had been paddling very close to the coast, within 500 meters all the way through to Miller's Run, I certainly would have been vulnerable had the wind swung direct west. If you are a surf skier, and in particular if you are used to doing reverses on the Miller's Run, then you will well know that our sport is not without risks. The question always is, where do we draw the line? Let's just review why I took a swim here, and my analysis is that my blade on my leeward side gets trapped behind my hips right here, and that's why I end up going in. So my note to self for future situations is to be very careful about my leeward blade and to put far more force on the windward side and being very intentional about keeping the blades well ahead of my hips, just with short strokes, not pulling back too much as I did in this particular instance. But there is another big problem with this remount, and you'll notice there that my leash has come attached. It's dragging by my left leg. If we roll the tape back a bit, this is me connecting my leash, which then fits underneath my life jacket, and it appears as though I've done a decent job, but in retrospect I realized that I didn't do a check. So I typically, once I've fitted it on a regular Miller's Run, I typically grab my leash and pull the connection from underneath my life jacket to make sure that it has closed properly, which I did not do on this instance. While on the topic of this fitting, it is in fact subject to 3 potential failures, 2 serious and 1 less so. The first one you've just seen is a false close, which is serious. The second, which is not so serious, is that upon opening, you can in fact break the spring inside, which is not a stainless steel spring. Also, I've been told by the retail supplier from whom I bought the fitting. Typically, however, that wouldn't be particularly serious because you would normally be opening that fitting quite close to the beach. And then the third failure, which is also a serious one, which is that whatever you've tied to the pin and you use as a handle can catch between your thigh and the edge of the ski when you're remounting and unintentionally open the fitting. I'll cover this topic in more detail in my upcoming series on every mistake I've ever made, and there will be one dedicated video just on the topic of leashes. that is the end of the safety review in this video. It just runs for another minute and a half or so just to show you what the conditions were like. In one instance, as I'm taking my ski to the racks, I end up getting pinned by a gust against the fence with my ski where it must have been close to 50 knots. Store this ski at this club. This stays at the beach, but I needed to store it here temporarily in one of the empty racks, as I knew I wouldn't be able to reload it onto my car on my own. This is where I end up getting trapped against the fence behind me here. I mean, it must have been going 50 knots at least. So I'd like to hear from you. How far and how long can you paddle directly into a 30, 35 or 40 knot headwind? Thanks for watching, and just a reminder that every time you do, you help raise just a little bit of money that goes directly to the NSRI. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you on the channel again shortly.